Hi everyone, Jake Henry here, Savannah Tree Foundation Field Manager, and today we're planting a tree. So we wanted to make this video so that you all understand the best way to plant a tree to ensure it for success. Now it varies a little bit based on the size of your tree, but today we're actually planting a 3-gallon tree. So they're typically pretty small, especially this species. So this is a Magnolia grandiflora, or southern magnolia. But this cultivar is actually called a little gem. So this is a dwarf cultivar. It only gets up to about 20-25 feet tall. So this is a great one to work with. You don't have to deal with a massive tree. And they start out pretty small, but they're beautiful trees, and we're gonna go through how to plant this today. So one of the most important steps is to know your tree. So I know that this tree is pretty short and it doesn't spread a lot, so that really informs where we can plant it. Now, if we're planting something bigger, say a live oak or a bald cypress, we need to account for that and make sure that we've got plenty of space where we want to plant it. But today, we're going to be planting that little gem right about here, and we've got a couple other trees nearby, not too far away, which is fine. It gives us plenty of space. There's a dogwood here that's pretty close, but this one's coming out eventually, so we don't have to worry about that. This type of tree, probably leave about 10 feet away from the base of the tree, just so it's got enough space to grow. Other trees, you want to leave more space. A live oak is probably on the extreme end. You want to leave, a good 20-30 feet around that. So to start, what we're going to do is actually use our pot and go right about here. And typically you want the size of your hole at the top to be 1.5 to 2 times bigger than your pot. And I'll explain why in just a second. But essentially what we'll do is just kind of use our pot and mark it all the way around so that we know how wide our hole actually needs to be. And this is great, easy soil. Sometimes you hit a lot of roots, so this is a nice planting spot today. All right, so there we go. Now, we do that because when we plant the tree, we want to make sure that those roots can grow out into the surrounding soil easily. So we give it a little extra space, so it's kind of a little bit more loose, and it's easier for it to start rooting out. And then when it gets to the more compacted soil over here, it's not having such a difficult time. So, what we need to do is remove all the grass and roots on the top layer, and then we're going to dig down. So a trick that I like to do is kind of cut across the top here like this, so we can actually remove the grass and roots, because we don't want to put that back in there. We want it to just be nice and clear dirt, and we're going to do a little mulch as well. But this helps reduce the amount of weeds and competition that the tree has to deal with. So you can see here, this is all pretty loose now, and this will just come right up. Okay, shake that out a little bit. Move some of those roots. Okay, so that's aside. We're not going to use that, but we will reuse a lot of this dirt. So we'll make a separate pile for that. Now, when we're digging down, make sure that you're not going to hit any utilities or power lines or sprinklers, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that your tree is going to have nice, clear space to root into. And another good benefit of planting is you get to see what your soil is like. You don't often get to see below the surface and see what all is down there. This is a great way to find out if you have sandy soils, or if you have a lot of clay, or if you need to do any kind of remediation. Sometimes you'll even find buried treasure. So here's what happens if you hit a really big root. You have a couple options. So you can see here, we've actually hit a really big root in this hole. So you can do a couple things. You can cut through the root and actually remove it. For a mature tree, losing a root like that, it's not going to kill the tree, it's okay. But that's also a lot of work, and I don't really want to do that. So a great alternative is to just shift the hole a little bit. So what we're going to do is just sort of widen it up on this side and make our lives a little bit easier. And we won't be damaging the tree that is using that root. But again, if you do want to cut through it, if you have a very limited amount of space, it's okay to cut through one root like that. It won't kill the tree. All right, this is looking much better on this side now. So you're cutting through a few small roots here. That's bound to happen. Don't feel bad, they will grow back. Okay, so now that we've gone down a little ways, we need to check the depth of our hole. So the first thing that we're going to do is take our tree out of its pot. This is the most important step. Now, this one, it looks like it's not rooted too much. Sometimes you want to push on it, help break it up, loosen it up. If it's really rooted a lot, sometimes you have to cut the pot off, but ideally, you should be able to just sort of slide it right out. Set that aside. And you can see here, there's some nice roots on the side, and really you just want to loosen them up. If you have any roots that are starting to circle around the edge of the pot, you want to cut those. What happens is if you leave them, those roots keep circling and eventually they'll just sort of girdle the tree. So you want to make sure that you get those encouraged to go outwards and not continue in a circle. You see here it's nice and loose. That's a good thing. Now, one of the other things we want to check is the root flare. So you want to pull back the soil here so that you can start to see where the roots come out at the base of our tree. And sometimes it's pretty subtle. You can see it's swollen here. That's really where we want this tree to be at the surface. So what we're going to do is make sure that that is either at the surface or maybe an inch or two above it. It's really important to do that. If you plant it too deep, it'll actually pool up water and it can kind of suffocate the roots. So it's really important that you plant it just a little bit high. Planting your tree too deep is one of the most common mistakes that is made when planting a tree, and it can really affect the tree throughout its entire life. So let's check the depth here, and I think we are way too deep, so we definitely don't want that. So we're gonna fill back in, and we can use a lot of this really good stuff. We're gonna pack this in here. When your tree comes from a nursery, it typically has some really good soil in there, some organic matter mixed in, maybe some fertilizer. So we do want to use that when we plant. However, we don't want to add any extra fertilizer. It's sort of a tough love scenario. If you give it too much, it'll get used to it and it won't want to root out into the surrounding soil. So it's really important to use a lot of this native soil that you have here. All right. And as you're putting it back in, just sort of pack it down, just so you get some of that air out of there. You can also just stomp on it, tamp it down with your boots. Let's see how we're looking here. All right, that's still pretty deep. So we're gonna put some more soil back in there. All right, so now we've got our hole right about where we want it. It looks pretty shallow, but remember, we want that root flare right at the surface. So one thing that you want to make sure is your roots aren't going in a circle or anything like that. You kind of want them nice and spread out and loose, just so that they're encouraged to grow in the right direction. And one thing that's good to do at this step as well is to water it back in. This one's pretty moist, so we're not going to worry about it too much today, but it is really important to make sure that you've got lots of water, especially right when it's planted. And another important step is make sure your tree is upright. So whatever angle you plant it at, it will stay at. So we want to make sure that our tree is nice and upright, nice and straight, because once it is set, it is set. And we'll get more of this really good soil from the nursery in here. Get some leaves, a little bit of natural mulch. And then we will put the rest of the soil back in. Now, one thing that's important to do when you're putting this dirt back in is to not pile it up against the base of your tree. That's another really common mistake that we find. It can trap a lot of moisture along the base of your tree, causing a lot of disease and decay, can really encourage insects. So that's something you really want to avoid when you're planting your new tree. And like I said, you can kind of tamp it down with your boots, or you can use your hands, the shovel. We just want to make sure that we're packing that soil down, because all those air pockets in there will dry out those roots so quickly if we're not doing this. And don't worry if there's a little bit of empty space, it'll settle and fill in, so it'll be in pretty good shape. Now, one of the most important steps that we have to do for every tree is mulch. Mulch is our secret weapon. Now, mulch can come in a lot of different forms. There's cypress mulch, pine needle mulch, just sort of natural mulch like this. You can find mulch at hardware stores. A lot of times that mulch has dye in it, so we try to use mulch that's just real natural. Bark chips, leaves, wood, sticks, just a little bit of everything in here. Mulch serves a lot of purposes, so it can actually provide a lot of nutrients to the soil, and that's what most people know it as. But it does a couple other really important factors. The first of which is it keeps the soil moist. That is so important when this tree is brand new. We want to make sure that soil stays nice and moist, it doesn't dry out. And this also helps regulate the temperature. So mulch will actually keep it cool in the summer and keep it a little warm in the winter. Think of it as a little blanket for the tree. So this is really one of the best things that you can do for your newly planted tree, and especially for your mature trees as well. So we're just going to spread a little bit of this around. And you don't want it to be more than 2 to 4 inches deep. So just kind of spread it out nice and evenly around the base of the tree. And just like with the soil, make sure that it's not up against the base of the tree. We want to leave that nice and open, nice and aerated, and just have a nice little disc of soil here. And that's it. That's all it takes to plant a tree. It's really not too hard, and it will provide benefits for years and years to come. And like I said, watering is one of the most important things for your newly planted tree. You want to water it 1 to 2 times a week and give it at least, 3 to 4 gallons each time. That's for a small tree like this. The bigger the tree, the more water it's going to need. So we'll do another video later on about how to plant a bigger tree. There are some other considerations you have to deal with, but this is how you plant a 3-gallon tree. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Take care.